안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 오늘도 시청자분들과의 약속을 지키기 위해 이 피곤한 몸을 이끌고 운동을 하려고 합니다. 오늘도 날씨 너무 좋아요. 이제 추석이 하루 남았죠. 내일까지만 출근하면은 추석 연휴의 시작입니다. 하지만 저는 일을 합니다. 명절에는 일을 해야죠. 진짜 날씨가 너무 좋습니다. 하늘 너무 이뻐요. 작년 가을에 이렇게 하늘이 좋았나요? 올해 유독 날씨가 되게 좋은 것 같아요. 코로나 때문에 먼지가 많이 없어진 건지 모르겠지만 어쨌든 날씨는 너무 좋네요. 어저께 여러분들이 안 믿으시겠지만 제가 영상 촬영을 했잖아요. 윗몸 일으키기랑 팔굽혀펴기를 하고 나서 턱걸이랑 스쿼트를 했어요. 똑같이 30분 40분 정도. 그래서 오늘은 뭘 할 거냐면은 오늘은 복근 운동이랑 스쿼트를 할 건데 스쿼트를 그냥 안 하고 요거 오랜만에 이 캐틀벨 10kg짜리를 들고 할 겁니다. 팔굽혀펴기랑 턱걸이를 왜 안 할 거냐면은 오늘 건강검진 재검을 받았어요. 이 체열을 했습니다. 체열 피를 뽑았어요, 여러분. 그래서 오늘은 하체랑 복근 운동을 위주로 할 겁니다. 일단은 복근 운동하고 이거 스쿼트 하겠습니다. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN이죠.
State authorities here in the United States are investigating his state tax returns, so there may be
와,
some
날씨 너무
news
좋아
there as well.
진짜.
So his tax data also reveals that he's using the presidency to keep himself afloat. So what will happen when and if he loses office? What's his legal vulnerability here?
It'll be interesting to see what the next administration does. I have to say there are some matters here that seem worthy of investigation. A mere, for example, incorrectly taken deduction is not a crime, but if, for example, there was a false statement here that Trump knew about when he signed it, that potentially could be a criminal violation. And it seems on its face that these documents are at odds with Trump's financial disclosures, which show him with significant assets and don't list the debts that are listed here by the New York Times.
And we've also learned that he's in the middle of a tax audit that involves a $72 million tax refund that he requested. That presumably was the red flag here. So what have you learned about that?
Well, what we have learned here, of course, is that that audit is still ongoing. I will say I represent lots of people who run into tax trouble, and it is possible to delay those investigations significantly. But I am surprised that Trump has been able to delay it this long. And I think that Congress needs to provide oversight and see whether or not Trump or any of his allies in the administration are interfering with the IRS.
And what's your sense of how these documents fell into the hands of the New York Times? Do you think someone within the IRS wanted to see these go public?
I think it's more likely someone at, for example, Trump's accounting firm wanted to see them go public. There's been a huge battle here in the courts over those tax returns, and in fact, his accounting firm actually was willing to comply, but had to wait for the Supreme Court of the United States to issue a ruling along those lines. So it seems that since that ruling has delayed release until after the election, I wouldn't be surprised if someone at the accounting firm took it in his or her hands to release these before the election.
And what about the legal vulnerability of his company?
Well, his company very well is more likely to have liability than him because the company itself is, making these statements, and it's a little bit easier to prove that the company is doing so willfully than it is for Trump individually, because Trump's own head, it can be difficult to decipher in terms of his intent. So I think there is potential liability for his company, and we're going to have to see whether or not he wins re-election, because I think we can count on the Justice Department not to take action until he leaves office.
Right, we'll watch to see the ramifications of all of this. Renato Mariotti, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all of this coming right in the middle of a fiercely contentious debate about the president's ultra-conservative pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. On Sunday, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden called the rush to seat Judge Amy Coney Barrett an abuse of power.
The Senate has to stand strong for our democracy. They must not act on this nomination until the American people finish the process they're already begun of selecting their president and their Congress. And the voters, in my view, are not going to stand for this abuse of power. And if we're to call ourselves a democracy, their voices must be heard.
The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to approve Judge Barrett's nomination in less than a month, setting up a full Senate vote by the end of October. Meanwhile, the president keeps pushing false rhetoric about widespread mail-in ballot fraud, telling the media on Sunday he hopes Judge Barrett is paying attention to potential cases.
I do. I'm sure she is. I think everybody is. I think everyone in the country. I think we've made it a very big issue. And it's an issue that the Democrats tried to get away with. I don't think they're getting away. I mean, so many reports now of phony ballots.
Anticipating President Trump will contest the election, US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to her Democratic colleagues urging them to focus on winning state delegates. She wrote, "How many state delegations the Democrats win in this upcoming election could determine who our next president is." Well, locked down in a dorm room, why UK officials have told thousands of university students to self-isolate. The details in a live report from London.
Busan, an oceanic capital open wide to the world. A city of opportunity for successful business, with a convenient environment and infrastructure for overseas financial companies to achieve active and efficient business in the rapidly changing global environment. Busan, maritime finance and derivatives hub of Northeast Asia, the future of global finance.
Donald Trump. We need very sharp people. Joe is not qualified for this position. Joe Biden.
Donald Trump doesn't understand duty, honor, country.
The first presidential debate. Watch it live on CNN. Special coverage Wednesday.
3 states have been voting almost entirely by mail for years. 6 more will vote primarily that way this year. 35 more will allow all voters to request a mail-in ballot to ensure that everyone has a say in who becomes president of all 50.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of the camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
So great that you're here today. Just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest. I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them? Trust that you'll be accurate. You'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move, very eerie, all the roads being closed off. Describe the scene that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what happened.
우리 집 천장이 조금만 더 높았으면 좋겠어. 너무 낮아.
What is the point of dropping them? We continue to monitor the government crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed.
그리고 이 추락 방지 이것도 없었으면 좋겠어.
Maxwell Scott, CNN.
진짜 하늘 너무 이쁩니다, 여러분.
And that book was about the outpouring
날씨
migration
너무
of 6
좋다.
million African Americans from the Jim Crow South, essentially defecting what I came to call a caste system. And that was because the word racism that we are so accustomed to using did not seem sufficient to capture the world as it existed in that way, the hierarchies into which people have been born, the multi-layered forms of controlling and repressing people on the basis of what they look like, this artificial hierarchy. And with the use of the term caste, it allows us to have new language for the divisions that we have inherited as a country. in this era of upheaval, we need new language in order to understand how we got to where we are and how we might be able to find a way to push past it, to transcend the boundaries that have been created for us long ago.
Global coronavirus deaths will soon reach 1 million, and India is reporting that it now has more than 6 million confirmed cases. That country has seen more than 95,000 deaths. But in the United States, President Donald Trump keeps incorrectly insisting that the pandemic is winding down.
We're rounding the turn. They hate when I say that, the opposition, but we're rounding the turn on the pandemic, and very incredibly, we have some of the great vaccines, great companies, and we're going to have different vaccines, very powerful vaccines, great vaccines, and therapeutics. But this is all happening very, very soon. So we're in great shape.
10분 넘었네.
Well, as you can see on the map, cases are trending up across much of the United States. And top infectious diseases Dr. Anthony Fauci warns that the US is still in the first wave of the virus. US health officials are warning of a potential surge in coronavirus cases during the fall and winter months. And this comes as almost half the country is reporting an increase in new infections, and flu season is getting underway. CNN's Natasha Chen has the latest.
Over the past week, the 7-day average of new cases in the U.S. has been steadily above 40,000 a day. And that's concerning because the trend had come down in early September compared to the nationwide peak back in mid-to-late July. And now it's expected to back up. On Sunday, Florida became the third state in the country to top 700,000 total cases, following Texas and California over the summer. But Florida is also among about a dozen states whose new cases have actually fallen in the past week compared to the week before. And Governor Ron DeSantis has moved the state into phase 3, removing any sort of restrictions on capacity limits in places like restaurants and bars. Meanwhile, in New York City, deputies broke up a wedding of about 300 people in Queens over the weekend, issuing them tickets for multiple misdemeanors. And health officials there on Sunday warned that the cases of COVID-19 are growing still at an alarming rate in parts of Brooklyn and Queens. On Saturday, the number of new cases across the state of New York broke 1,000 for the first time since early June, and Governor Cuomo is warning people to still comply with wearing masks, social distancing, and following local health guidelines as the flu season approaches. Natasha Chen, CNN, Atlanta.
Anne Ramoyne is a professor of epidemiology at the UCLA Fielding
스쿼트
School
하겠습니다.
of Public Health. She joins me now. Good
요거 캐틀벨 들고 10개씩
Dr.
할게요.
Anthony Fauci has pointed out that the White
일단
House has
목표는
pivoted
100개입니다.
away from daily task force meetings. How concerned are you that this is an effort
하늘
to
보면서.
make it look like COVID-19 is starting to go away as the presidential election draws nearer and as Donald Trump focuses on the economy instead?
I don't think that the American public should be listening to the White House press briefings as the sole way of determining whether or not where we are with this virus. There's plenty of evidence to suggest where we are going, looking at the daily trackers, looking at the Johns Hopkins website, looking at the
별로 안 힘드니까 바로 이 세트 가겠습니다.
websites where we live, listening to any public health professional on the news, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redfield, even Dr. Hahn. I think if you listen to the public health professionals, they'll tell you we are still in the thick of it, and whether or not we have the task force meetings, which tend to be very political in nature, the fact still remains. We are seeing a lot of cases. We're seeing more cases. We're seeing cases spike in many places, and we're going to continue to see this.
Right, and a recent study just showed that fewer than 10% of Americans have COVID-19 antibodies, so we are nowhere near herd immunity, and a vaccine for the whole population is a very long way off. So how likely is it that we will all be wearing masks throughout next year? Do we just need to get used to that idea?
Rosemary,
현재
even if we do have
20개
a
했습니다.
vaccine
20개.
that comes available,
80개 넣어야겠습니다.
at the end of this
요번에는
year,
한 번에 20개
next
할게요.
year, it's going to take a very long time for that vaccine to be distributed to the entire population. And a vaccine is not likely to be so effective that it will be the only measure in place. We are still going to be needing to wear masks, to social distance, to use hand hygiene. And so I think that the American public, I think that the world needs to get used to wearing masks. Masks do work, and in fact, we can be saving lives right now by wearing a mask, because we do know how effective masks are. We don't know what vaccine candidates are out there, and so I think we need to be we need to stop waiting for a magic bullet and do what we can right now, which is wear a mask and to get used to it, because it is something that can save your life and save other people's lives as well.
We appreciate your scientific guidance as always, Anna Moyne. Many thanks.
My pleasure.
We turn to Europe now, where governments are grappling with how to handle a new wave of infections. In Manchester, England, 1,700 university students have been told to self-isolate in their dorm rooms after a large number of cases were confirmed on campus. Meanwhile, in Marseille, France, all bars and restaurants will close from today for at least a week. Several other cities will also see tighter restrictions. Well, CNN's Scott McLean is live for us in London this hour, and CNN's Melissa Bell is in the French capital. They join us both now. Good to see you. So, Scott, let's start with you. How are universities in Manchester planning to feed and look after the 1,700 students being forced to self-isolate?
Hey, Rosemary. So yeah, both the City Council in Manchester and the university say that these students will be taken care of in terms of food, their health care, their mental well-being as well, while they're under isolation for the next 14 days. But obviously, the number one priority for the broader community is the public health response to the coronavirus. And universities right now are a pretty big concern. In fact, Scotland has actually banned university students from going to restaurants or bars to try to contain outbreaks on campus and stop them from getting into the wider community.
60개 더 해야 됩니다. 60개.
That you mentioned in Manchester is forcing 1,700 students to quarantine, or else they will face disciplinary action. The UK government has made all kinds of restrictions, rules, regulations over the past 2 weeks, but now British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing somewhat of a revolt from MPs within his own party who want to make sure that Parliament gets a chance to actually vote on any new coronavirus restrictions or rules or laws that are made. Here's one of those MPs over the weekend.
How do people think that liberty dies? It dies like this, with government exercising draconian powers without parliamentary scrutiny in advance, undermining the rule of law by having a shifting blanket of rules that no one can understand. I mean, it's extremely serious.
20개 한 번에 가겠습니다.
Like a hysterical person to you, I'm saying that this is a very serious moment.
So a prominent Labour MP was asked about this amendment that those Conservative MPs are pushing in Parliament, and he said that he was sympathetic to their cause, but ultimately would not say whether his party would support it, Rosemary.
Right, and to Paris now. Melissa, several cities are tightening restrictions. What all are they doing?
Well, what we've seen is this steady rise in positivity rates, and more worryingly, Rosemary, here in France, a rise in the number of people in ICUs. When you look at it from the start of the month, the number of people in intensive care units in France has nearly
20개 했어요. 20개. 10개 바로 가겠습니다.
That's how fast this illness is progressing here, is how fast this second wave is going. Hence these new restrictions in 11 cities, including Paris. From tonight, bars will have to close at 10 p.m. There was pushback from that from local authorities, as you imagine. But for the hardest of all will be for the Marseille region, where that even faster and the ICUs are under even greater strain. It is there that bars and restaurants from last night were closed entirely. Now, we had been told that would be for 2 weeks. We're now hearing there'll be a reassessment in a week's time because, of course, it is a constant balance between trying to protect the healthcare system, which is once again, just as it was during the first wave, threatened, Rosemary, but trying to ensure that what fragile recovery had been achieved economically.
20개, 20개, 30개 했어요. 70개 했습니다. 30개만 더 하면 돼요.
Expect, I'm sure, over the coming days, a few protests. They threaten them. They think it's unfair that they're being made to bear once again the brunt of this. But again, quite objectively, it is about the number of people entering ICU, the number of COVID-19 patients entering ICU that has been shooting up, and it is about protecting the healthcare system and ensuring that it can continue to function, Rosemary.
Right, Melissa Bell in Paris, Scott McLean in London. Many thanks to both of you. An explosive new report details President Trump's financial losses along with how little he may have paid in taxes. And it's sure to come up in Tuesday's debate against his Democratic rival. That on the other side of the break.
Climate change affects people all over the world. But what if all food packaging came from nature and didn't impact the climate? At Tetra Pak, we're on a journey towards delivering the world's most sustainable food package. Fully renewable, fully recyclable, carbon neutral. Go nature, go carton. Learn more at gonature.tetrapak.com.
Congratulations to CNN for winning 8 News and Documentary Emmy Awards.
Secretary Esper, welcome to the program.
This belongs to a Russian Special Forces.
Every road, a story of people fleeing hatred.
To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus, fact versus fiction.
일단 10개 한번 하겠습니다. 10개. 안 힘들어, 안 힘들어. 10개 더 할 수 있어.
Upwork is a platform that matches skilled freelancers with clients looking for freelancers to do incredibly important work for them. Things like web development, parts of their work. All of the skilled workers on the Upwork platform are working remotely, and that's been part of our model for 20 plus years. Even before the pandemic, people were leaning into remote work in a significant way, but absolutely overnight, we've seen huge increases in remote work. And we believe that the current shifts we're seeing in the landscape around remote work are tectonic. These are huge changes that not only have happened during this crisis, but really will be enduring. Because I think workers and companies are seeing the benefits of remote work, and they're not going to want to go fully back to the old models that they had prior to the crisis. And we're hearing that from customer after customer and seeing that in the data as well, with so many companies reporting that remote work will be part of the new normal for them, even once this pandemic passes.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
30초만 누워 있을게요.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm Rosemary Church. I want to return now to the New York Times report that US President Trump did not pay any federal income taxes for 10 of the previous 15 years before 2016. It says he paid just $750 in taxes the year he won the election, and that same amount the first year of his presidency. The New York Times concludes that Mr. Trump has had more success playing a business mogul than actually being one. President Trump is dismissing the report as fake news and claims he pays a lot in federal income taxes. He also says he's willing to release his tax returns once he's no longer under audit by the Internal Revenue Service. David K. Johnston is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter who has written extensively on President Trump. He spoke earlier about the Times report with CNN.
Donald took enormous deductions in 2008.
마지막 10개.
$1.4 billion of deductions. And there's nothing I see in the Times reporting that would explain deductions of that size. Now, why is that important? Well, Donald has been tried twice for income tax fraud, story I broke 5 years ago. And he lost both of those cases. He just made up deductions in that case. And one of the implications of the Times story is that he may have just made up deductions. There are questions specifically in the Times report about whether improper deductions were taken for certain kinds of personal, and whether possibly there was a disguised gift that was turned into a tax deduction involving Ivanka.